Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. This is the Fast Friday edition of the show for January 10th, 2020. A lot of people really seem to believe that trust but verify is a good approach for dealing with politicians. But this flies in the face of warnings and advice that we were given by virtually every leading founding father. It's my view that trusting politicians is dangerous all the time, and I think it was their view as well. So I'm going to share with you a bunch of quotes to back that position up. First of all, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. You can find a bunch of different live streaming video channels. We have archived video channels and platforms, plus archived audio-only podcast edition. You find all of those, all the ways to follow us, the ways to support us through our membership program, the archives for this program starting since day one, links that I mentioned for each episode. All that good stuff is over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. Again, that's 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. All spelled out. Look, I am really grateful for you spending a little bit of your time with me today, and I promise not to take too many minutes. Since it's the Fast Friday edition of the show, let's see if I can get this done in about 10 minutes or so. Let's get right to it. Now, over the years, we've gotten literally, at least in my opinion, countless examples of why politicians shouldn't be trusted. And it doesn't matter what letter they have after their name or who's in charge, what team is in charge, and which one's the opposition. A lot of people seem to continue to trust these people to do the right thing over and over and over, or even act as opposition. But I don't think really any of them are trustworthy. We've had so many people run for the office of president on a humble or a peaceful foreign policy. We were told that the income tax was just going to be a temporary, small wartime emergency measure. The Patriot Act, of course, was just going to be used to get the terrorists, and on and on and on. We were warned against trusting these people, all of them. Let's start out with one that I've been mentioning, a quote that I've been mentioning over and over on this show, and I don't think it can be repeated often enough. That's Patrick Henry, one of my favorite founders, in the Virginia Ratifying Convention in 1788. And here's how he put it. Actually, let me see if I can put this full screen. He said, "Show me that age and country where the rights and liberties of the people were placed on the sole chance of their rulers being good men without a consequent loss of liberty." Look, this is really straightforward stuff. If you trust politicians to do the right thing, if you trust them to be good and not violate your rights, but you hand them a bunch of power where they could, you will always lose your liberty. Look, Patrick Henry knew this in 1788 and obviously far earlier than that. We should know this today. We should absolutely know this today. But it wasn't just Patrick Henry. We can go on the opposite end of the political spectrum from the founding era and look to a guy, John Adams. Oh, let me pull this up on the screen again. And here he was in 1772. And this is, if you've heard me talk about John Adams, there was the great John Adams, the really good one in the early days, and then the later on John Adams. This is from 1772. And he put it this way: "There is danger from all men. The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty." The only maxim. Like, if you're going to have freedom, you can't trust these people. George Washington even warned us that if you allow them the power to do stuff that isn't authorized in the Constitution, this was in his famous farewell address, if you allow them to do this, you trust them to do something good, even if they are good people today. This is how Washington described it, the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed, because sooner or later someone's going to come along and use that power in ways that violates your rights, in ways that you don't like it. That's why you shouldn't trust any of them to do things, even if you think they're good people or are going to do the right thing in a certain situation. And James Madison agreed with this as well. Here he is in 1829 in a debate in Virginia. He says, "The essence of government is power." The essence of government is power. That's what government is based on. Of course, Adams, back in his good old days, he said fear is the foundation of most governments, but the essence of government is power. So if you're afraid of something, they're going to use power against you. Madison summed it up. He says, power, lodged as it must be in human hands, will ever be liable to abuse. This is the old power corrupts saying. We know that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, Samuel Adams had almost the exact same thing to say in a letter to his friend James Warren in 1780. He said, power is intoxicating, and men legally vested with it too often discover a disposition to make an ill use of it and an unwillingness to part with it. What a surprise, right? You give these guys power and they're going to find ways to expand that power and use it to violate your rights or to expand their own influence, power, wealth, whatever it may be. And John Dickinson said almost the exact same thing when he said all artful rulers who strive to extend their power beyond its just limits endeavor to give their attempts as much semblance of legality as possible. They're always going to argue that what they're doing is right, but we shouldn't trust that they're doing the right thing, that they're good people. If we circle back to Patrick Henry, he said that in the Virginia Ratifying Convention in 1788, his great friend Richard Henry Lee, his compatriot in Virginia, the following year sent him a letter that said this: it must never be forgotten, although it seems to have been forgotten throughout my whole lifetime. I don't really know too many people. I mean, obviously, you guys watching and listening, this is probably very elementary stuff, but so many people in the general public, they trust their team over the others and vice versa. He says it must never be forgotten that the liberties of the people are not so safe under the gracious manner of government as by the limitation of power. This is the exact same thing that Henry was saying when he says, like, look, you can't just trust these people to be good. Richard Henry Lee just happened to say the gracious manner of government. You can't trust them. You have to limit their power, and then you have to do something about it. And speaking of doing something about it, let's go back to James Madison, and then he was writing to Thomas Jefferson, and what Madison proposed doing about it, and what they actually approved at the Philadelphia Convention and ratified the people of the several states, is limitations on power, a strictly limited government, a government made of limited delegated powers. He says where the power is in the few, it is natural for them to sacrifice the many to their own partialities and corruptions. And that, the short version is like, look, if you take just a few people and you give them power over everything rather than distributing it, decentralizing, creating a federal system, they're almost always, it is just a natural consequence of that they're going to sacrifice your liberty in order to get things that they want. As soon as you give them power, they're going to use it in ways that give themselves advantage, not liberty. That's the same thing that Samuel Adams was saying, the same thing that Patrick Henry, that Richard Henry Lee, even John Adams. They all said the exact same thing. That was in a letter that he wrote, what did I say, 1788 to James Madison. I mean, James Madison wrote that to Thomas Jefferson. And then I want to sum this up with one more from Thomas Jefferson. This was from the Kentucky Resolutions of 1798. Obviously, those of you who watch the show regularly know that this was in response to the Hated and Alien and Sedition Acts signed as law that summer by John Adams. And Jefferson proposed that every state should nullify on their own authority any exercise of power beyond the delegated powers of the Constitution. And this is how he put it in the Kentucky Resolutions that year. In questions of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. Look, we know that Jefferson, because he wanted the people of the several states to nullify, he wasn't saying, wave the Constitution in front of these people. James Madison told us in Federalist 48 that even the best Constitution was a mere parchment barrier. We know that words on paper don't enforce themselves, but words on paper can give us a line in the sand on where it needs to be resisted every time they go beyond that line in the sand. Jefferson said to take a single step beyond the limits of the Constitution was to take a field of boundless power. So that's what he means by binding them down by the chains of the Constitution. Look, I hope you guys found this interesting, fun to watch, educational. Most importantly, I hope you learned something from this episode. I really enjoyed spending a little time with me today. I hope you did as well. I'm very grateful for that. If you support the show, make sure to smash that like button. Continue leaving comments, whether it's live or in the archive. Share. Reviews on iTunes are also very helpful. If you really want to pitch in, our membership program starts out as little as $2 a month. I even have one of our membership cards here for our annual memberships. You get one of these pretty cool, I don't know if it'll focus, maybe not. They're 110% Tenther membership card. That's for our annual 5-year and lifetime memberships. But whether you're able to pitch in financially or not, I am grateful for you spending some time with me. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and I'll see you next week here on the Path to Liberty.